Okay. Good morning. The Finance Committee is called to order at, I have 10:32 a.m. All members are present, that being Alderwoman Finlayson to my right and Alderwoman O'Neill to my left. At this time, I'll accept a motion to modify the agenda slightly.
I'll make a motion to move SA 1224 to the end of our agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, yes.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
At this time, I'll accept a motion to approve. We have two sets of meeting minutes. The first one is our meeting of November 8th. I'll accept a motion to approve those meeting minutes.
I'll move approval of the special meeting minutes and the joint meeting minutes from November 8th.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we have supplemental appropriations today, about 7 of them. I don't know if you heard Director Dickinson, we're moving SA 12-24 to the end of the meeting because it might warrant some more discussion. So we'll start with SA 13-24, which is a grant, and I see we have a representative from the police department here to discuss SA 13-24, and it involves bulletproof vests. And just introduce yourself, and thanks for being here.
All right, good morning. Lieutenant Ashion with the Annapolis Police Department. I'm the acting commander of administration. The Bureau of Justice Assistance grant is a 50-50 split for the purchase of ballistic vests. I believe the award amount is $3,383. There's an expiration date for this funding in 2025, but with the rotation of ballistic vests that's necessary as they expire after 5 years, it won't be a problem. The manufacturer only warranties them for 5-year period. It won't be a problem spending these funds.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions?
I do have a question.
Yes.
Detective, how many, no, you're not a detective, I'm sorry. You're captain now.
That's okay.
So, congratulations. How many vests will this buy us, and how many of our vests have expired, the life expectancy have expired?
So the vests are routinely replenished and replaced. I believe that there's one that's in urgent need of replacement, but the representative from our body armor company who comes in and measures everyone is scheduled to come in and measure that person. In terms of the exact cost of the vest, it changes over time. I don't have an exact number with me right now for how much one vest costs. I can tell you that they're not particularly cheap. And these are, by the way, like the vests, like the one I'm wearing right now, the concealable vests, and whether an officer is wearing this uniform or the one with like the outer carrier, the same panels are used regardless.
I think it might be helpful for us to have that information, especially for budget purposes. Because if they're going to be expiring over a 5-year period, we need a rotating fund that will allow us to continue to replace them.
Okay, yeah, I don't think that,
when it's convenient, we're not going to need it for today's purposes.
oh yeah, that's something that gets factored into the budget, is like whose vests are set to expire during that fiscal year, and having adequate funds in order to actually replace those based on what we anticipate ballistic vests costing, if the cost is foreseen to be going up during that time period.
Thank you, sir.
Question?
I was just going to say, this says 5 vests, and if it's a match, so that's approximately $1,300 per vest.
Sounds about right.
And related to Alderwoman Finlayson's question, the 50% match is on this, is coming from the operating budget. Director Dickinson, can you elaborate on where that is coming from, the match in the operating budget? Yeah.
While she's doing that, I'd like clarification because what I read was 5 level, not 5 level 2A. So we are talking about 5. Alderwoman said that it says 5, but I read that, maybe that's the English teacher and the comma person in me. So we are talking 5, but they're level 2A vest.
Yes. So
Okay.
there are different, so just so everybody knows, when they talk about the level of the vest, it's an NIJ standard for the type of threat that the vest is expected to defeat. So, and I think they're actually I think our vests are level 2. So there's level 2, which is generally what concealable body armor is. There's level 3A, which is actually one step below level 3. 3A is also soft body armor. It generally speaking, it defeats additional threats. And then there's level 3 and level 4 body armor. Level 3 and level 4 body armor is generally hard body armor. They're plates. And they defeat the highest level of ballistic threats.
Is 4, not a 5.
I'm sorry?
I said 4 is the highest level, not 5.
Right, I don't, yeah, level 4 is the highest level that you're going to see
Yeah.
with ballistic protection.
Okay, I just wanted clarification on whether we're talking number of vests or caliber of vest.
Yeah, it's the number, I do believe it's 5 vests that are slated to be purchased with these
Okay,
funds.
thank you.
So Director Dickinson, is that from uncommitted funds in the operating budget?
Yes, the extra funding for the match will come from turnover that they have from their positions being vacant.
All right. Okay. Do I have a motion for favorable recommendation on SA 13-24?
I'll move a favorable recommendation for SA 1324.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We'll take that as an aye. Don't realize you're joking. All right, next we have SA 14-24, which is from the State of Maryland Governor's Office for the, quote, warrant apprehension and absconding project, end quote. There is no match for this, and are you able to speak to that as well?
I can. Do we want to wait just a moment for?
Yeah, we should. Or can we can continue. We have a quorum.
Okay.
We're good.
If you want me to keep going, I can. So
She's back.
the purpose behind the warrant apprehension and absconding project is that the police department has noticed that in a considerable number of the cases where we have violent offenses being committed, sometimes those individuals are already wanted. The suspects are already wanted on an unrelated matter. So serving arrest warrants is a time-consuming process, especially for certain individuals who are difficult to locate. I know that one of our officers is a task force officer with the U.S. Marshals, and that's all they do is go out and look for people who are wanted. But they do it not just for us, but for many agencies within the region. So the idea behind this is that we would take these funds, and the bulk of the funds are to be applied for supplemental law enforcement overtime. It would actually be us working in concert with the Anne Arundel County Sheriff's Office in order to go out, pick certain warrants that are of high value, generally speaking, crimes of violence, and attempt to take those individuals into custody. About 104,000 of the award amount is slated for law enforcement overtime. So you actually have people out actively attempting to serve these warrants and take people into custody. There's a small portion, just under $3,000, for crime analyst overtime, because there are some there's some specialized tasks that we might need. Miss O'Neill, if you all are familiar with Christina O'Neill, she's our crime analyst. We might need to task her with, but we don't want to take up all of her time with some of the more mundane clerical management aspects of this. So there's also a contractual position that is budgeted to be paid for with this grant. So the salary for that is $31,500, and then the fringe that has to come along with that is just south of $7,000. So that's the personnel aspect of it. And then there's also equipment that's to be purchased with this grant funding. We're looking at a laptop, and that's actually for our task force officer with the U.S. Marshals. Without getting too much into it, the process of going out and seeking individuals who are wanted. Sometimes you can go to their home, knock on their door, and they're there, and that's a really easy one. Other times, people will know that they're wanted, and they make themselves very difficult to locate. There are investigative tools that we use, which are technology driven. And after speaking with the detective who's assigned to that task force, having a reliable, high-end laptop would allow him to perform some of these functions in the field. Again, I don't want to get too much into the techniques that they actually use. Some people know about them, but for those who don't, I don't want to necessarily broadcast them. But I've been involved in some operations which use these same techniques, and I can tell you that having in-field computing power in order to actually get them done is pretty invaluable. And that's a relatively small portion of the budget. But it's just south of $4,000.
Okay. Questions?
Not for me.
Yeah. I just have one that is very simple. If you did not have this money, you would not have the capability of doing this, correct?
No, I don't believe so.
That's what's really important for the
Yes.
public to know.
Unfortunately, there's no way of quantifying that, by arresting
Yeah.
10 people who were wanted on violent felonies, you prevented X number of subsequent Part 1 offenses. But when we see the trend that we've been seeing, that individuals who are committing crimes, once they are identified, and those are just the ones who actually are identified, it doesn't speak to the ones who aren't identified. The ones who are identified wind up often enough being wanted on some unrelated matter. It just stands to reason that if they weren't out and about free to commit those crimes, that maybe they wouldn't have happened in the first place.
So do I have a motion for a favorable recommendation of SA 14-24?
Madam Chair, I'll make a favorable recommendation for SA 1424.
Second?
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. And thank you for whoever in the department is securing these grants.
Yeah.
It's very good.
Oh yeah, the WAG grant was secured by Ms. McCoy. I'm just here pinch hitting for her, so to speak.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for taking the time.
No problem.
So next, we have SA 15-24, which is planning and zoning, a state grant for historic preservation purposes, and we have our Chief of Historic Preservation,
John Tower.
John Tower, here. Thanks for being here. Could you just
Of course.
explain a little bit about it for us?
This was something that had been discussed with Tim Leahy, who was the past chair of the HPC, and something that's necessary. We use our historic district design guidelines not only for public information, so the public is informed about what is allowable within the historic district, and to give them an understanding of what might be an approvable project, but also for different businesses that are interested in doing work within the historic district. And since the time that the guidelines were written and approved, which was 2007, I would say there have been a number of different developments within technology, just to begin with, and also interest from the business community. So I'll outline two of those things. One, for those of you who have been looking, and I know that that is definitely you, Ellie. You can see on the top of 80 Compromise Street, there are a number of antennas. And there really aren't strong guidelines to govern the concealment of those antennas. On the other hand, we have a federal mandate that requires us to approve these antennas for expanded 5G coverage, for all of these things that we all carry around and and like to use. Of course, we don't want to see any of the mechanics. So there's one thing that needs to be addressed. A second thing would be lighting. Lighting for businesses in the historic district. Right now, there are basic guidelines, but they're very, very, let's say, broad and simple. At this point, many businesses within the historic district are interested in creating lights that, let's say, bring attention to their business, and sometimes too much attention also from the neighbors. And I think it's important to have guidelines there that delineate what is approvable and when. For instance, there's no period of time mentioned within guidelines for businesses, but what I'd like to do is create a season for outdoor lighting. And the season would be when the nights are longest. So beginning with the end of daylight savings time to the beginning of daylight savings time. That would be the season for more outdoor lighting on businesses. And then it would end as the days grow longer. And so that's the sort of thing that would be included in this. Now, we've lost Tim, who is the project manager for this, and Bobby Collins is picking up. I don't know if you all are aware, but we haven't appointed a contract, and we haven't set out an RFQ. This was just finalized on November 1st. So we're not too far behind, but there's a period of time that the funds need to be used, and that's fiscal year 2023. So we've got essentially 7 months.
Okay. Just for clarity, the $20,000 is for the consultant, and as you said, the RFP is not written yet. How far does it go? The consultant will identify areas. Who will actually make the revisions in the guidelines? Is that, and ultimately code revisions, I assume?
Well,
So-
that's essentially true. Once the revisions are, let's say, finalized, I think they would go in front of the council. Just the way we did with the outdoor dining fixtures and
Got it.
furnishings.
Got it. Any questions?
I did. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I just had one clarification question, and I know there was an example of the lighting and a season for lighting. And I know of at least one business where we've had this discussion over the past few months about lighting. And you said between daylight savings and the end of daylight, so the summertime?
Well, essentially, when daylight savings ends, which is around the beginning of November, and then ending at about the beginning of March. And this would just be for, let's say, more pronounced lighting. Now, with businesses that have sidewalk cafes, the lighting for those businesses with sidewalk cafes is defined within the furnishings and fixtures, but businesses are known to would want as much as they can to draw attention to themselves. So there have definitely been some challenges there. So we'll see if we can find a happy medium with the revisions.
Okay, thank you. I just needed a clarification on that.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Towers, 20,000 doesn't seem like a lot of money to cover the work that is expected.
It's not. This would be a preliminary revision. It's not going to be comprehensive, and hopefully we'd be able to create, let's say, an ongoing revision for this, because things are constantly changing. I know that everyone thinks of the historic district and what's in it as being static. That's simply not true. Things change all the time. Uses, buildings, how they appear, lighting, things like that. I mean, 20 years ago, we didn't have sidewalk cafes. Or did we?
Well, we did.
I remember
but
the
illegally-
controversy.
Illegally, we did for a while. So I guess we should expect that you'll give a recommendation to us during the budget process so that this process can be continued.
Yes, and also there's an element of this which the Maryland Historic Trust is looking for, which is a contribution from the city, and that actual number hasn't been delineated, and we only got $20,000. We applied for 25, but we got 20, and I think within the planning and zoning budget, there should be enough money to contribute, let's say, a 20%, maybe 25% to this. And I will say, my division of planning and zoning does not spend a lot of money. I'm trying to think of ways to do it, but the process for spending money is really scrutinized. So this is one worthwhile thing.
Is the Main Street program, the business partnership, are they included, or is there an expectation that they would be included and be asked to participate financially?
I haven't approached them. I haven't approached any of the business partners, but I will say that they will be included in discussing and reviewing these revisions. And now that we're back to HPC public meetings as being live meetings, that's going to be a lot easier.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very, very much. At this time, I'll accept a motion for a favorable recommendation of SA 15-24.
I'll make that motion to give a favorable recommendation to the council for SA 15.
All in favor? Oh,
I'll second that.
Thank you for
I
the
will
second.
second that.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you for showing up, and also thank you for securing the grant and taking that initiative.
Well, you're welcome.
All right. The next, we have SA 16-24, and it's under the Planning and Zoning Department. And the way it reads is it appropriates $12,100 from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Contractual Services account. And the Affordable Housing Trust Fund revenue for fiscal year 2023, I guess upon closeout, was higher than projected. And this is excess that will provide additional funding for the rental assistant program. Just for some background, this Affordable Housing Trust Fund receives money from hotel tax. And so I think we need the Director of Finance to tell us why there is this, why this transfer vehicle has to happen. Like what is this Housing Trust Fund Contractual Service account?
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Director Dickinson.
Jody Dickinson, Finance Director. As we have with some of these smaller funds, during the budget process, we project what they're going to have left over at the end of the fiscal year, and we put that into the appropriations for the following year. In this case, they had additional funds available, higher than we projected. We've come for these similar requests to you when we had, like AIPPC had additional funds left over that they hadn't used. We add to their spending authority because they had more fund balance than we projected during the budget process. And so this is for this fund.
What confused me is the different name. It reads, you had a balance, and then you are of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and then you're sending that balance to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Contractual Services
Correct.
account. That's
So
the same fund?
The trust fund has fund balance, so that is your revenue source.
Yep.
And we're going to appropriate the expenditure through the account contractual services, because that is where the rental assistance payments are posted.
Okay.
You remember during budget, everybody's budget is divided by salaries and benefits, contractual services, supplies, and capital outlay. This fund's budget is in the contractual services line item.
Bingo, bango. Thank you. Any questions?
No.
I do have a question. I'm still not clear. We are really allocating this $12,100 to the rental assistance program?
Yes, it will allow them to spend $12,000 more this year. When we asked you to set up a budget for this year, we had underestimated the fund balance that would be left over from last year. So when they finished the year, and we've got pretty solid FY23 numbers now, they had $12,000 more than we had anticipated. So in order to spend it, we have to set up the budget, and this is establishing the budget.
So I guess I'm still not clear. Is there a contract to allocate these funds? I'm looking at the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Contractual Services. So we are contracting someone to allocate these funds?
No, that's,
Assistant City Manager.
I'm sorry, Assistant City Manager Vicki Buckland. That's simply the particular line item within the budget that the rental assistance program draws from. So these are payments, payments to landlords, utilities, right? Not done through, like, we don't hand that money to a contractor and then the contractor does it. That's done by OCS staff directly. It's just that this is the particular line item in the accounting where that money lives.
So do you see the confusion, at least for me?
I do.
Because it has two names.
Right, that was, yeah.
And I understand, and this is a kind of a different issue, but I understand the rental assistance program is already out of money. And we're not even 6 complete months into the program.
So this this particular extra will allow that program. We're not going to open up the portal again to applications writ large. But there are special circumstances that come up over the course of the year. You know, when we have situations, other kinds of situations that happen where using these funds, having this extra will allow us to more fully serve families that might be in a particular crisis that OCS is working with. So they will definitely be well used.
I have no doubt that they'll be well used. I guess I'm getting to the fact that if it's December and our fiscal year ends in June, we still have 6 months to go in this program. And already we're only going to be allocating funds in special circumstances, which I don't think was the intent, and I could be wrong. Alderman Gay would be able to speak to this far better. But if we're already low on funds in that program, what are we going to do for the next 6 months? And is 12,000 adequate to replenish that fund? Or should we be looking at a higher number? And I see Ms. Dickinson.
So remember that the funding for this rental assistance program is coming from occupancy, hotel motel / occupancy taxes, 3% of what we receive. So we can't spend any more than that 3% on this program. And so as of the 6-month point, we had depleted what we had budgeted within the budget number that we established at the beginning of the year, and we cannot go beyond that 3%. So this 12,000 reflects last fiscal year's extra
Revenue.
hotel revenue that we got that we didn't anticipate. So we're adding that little bit in, but until fiscal year 24 is finished, we won't know if we have additional to add for 24. We may end up with a little more at the end of this year if occupancy taxes exceed what we projected.
I think, and thank you
So
for that
yes,
clarification.
and I understand your point. Yes, we only got through 6 months with rental assistance payments. It's a very popular program.
However, to your point, kind of what happens now, I think that you know, one of the conversations that we're in now is, do we have some recommendations for how to either more target that program a little bit more so that it lasts longer, making sure we've got, you know, everyone's good about making sure that folks have utilized other kinds of programs that they might be eligible for, but doing a comb through again to make sure that we've really, you know, maximized and leveraged those external sources, so that the funding that is there stretches a little bit further.
May I ask then, are there specific standards by which residents have to measure or have to be measured in order to qualify?
Yes, there are a couple. There's some, you have to meet income standards, and there's a cap on how much we can give out in any individual case. And that's the exact criteria is something we can share with you, so you just have a copy of it.
That would be helpful.
Yep, absolutely.
Is it one opportunity in a 12-month period, or?
Yeah, we do check to make sure that this is they've come once in the fiscal year. Yeah.
And I'm asking these questions because I'm hearing some of my colleagues talking about how to replenish the account, the rental assistance. But I'm just learning from Ms. Dickinson that because of the state
Allocation.
allocation that was made, we're limited to 3%. I'm not sure how that works, but of their money, of
Of the
their
occupancy tax funds, yes.
Right, at
That's what's
3%.
going in here, and we cannot spend more within this fund of those funds. Any other kind of allocation would have to be something outside that revenue source.
So if we decide to use our budget funds, lack of a better description, then we're not restricted to that 3%, but 3% of the hotel tax, we are.
Well, I don't know what you mean by our budget funds.
Well, I mean,
Just
we can
other-
take it
some
out of
other
our general
resource?
fund. We can take it out of our general fund. We're not we're only restricted to 3% of the hotel
The
tax.
occupancy tax. So I'm just, the reason I'm hesitating is I'm not sure what particular resource you're talking about, because all the revenues that are budgeted for the general fund have been allocated to other expenses, so that, I'm just
and-
thinking about the particulars.
And I'm
Yes.
not talking about taking money from others. I'm
Okay.
just trying to clarify.
Yes, you'd have to find another source
Yes.
for that allocation.
Okay, I just want to be clear, because I know there's a movement afoot to try to replenish this account. But knowing the state stipulations as far as the 3%, which we do know. So anyway, I'm clear. I'm very clear. Thank you.
Just to, now I'm confused, because technically, theoretically, you could say that that already is coming out of our general fund. Would that not be the case? The hotel tax appropriation would otherwise go to the general fund.
We used to put that 3% directly into the general fund.
Correct,
Now, instead of putting it there,
correct,
it's put over here.
right. That's,
So it did draw from what would have been available for the general fund.
yeah, it's kind of, that's kind of.
What I'm saying is that's all we have currently
Okay.
to use for the program out of that separate fund.
Before I go to Alderman O'Neill, just a real simple question. Why then was there excess reported in 2023?
So when we're doing our projections.
Well, it was the projection.
So occupancy, we project what we think occupancy taxes, how much we're going to collect,
Yeah,
what this 3% pocket is.
yeah,
The AIPPC gets 3%, et cetera.
yeah,
Our projections are not precise.
Yep.
And we had extra. The general fund reaped some of that benefit with our piece of the occupancy taxes. They were higher than what we had originally anticipated.
yeah.
So this is just their 3% of what we collected in excess of what we had projected during the budget formulation process.
Okay, Alderman O'Neill has a question.
Thank you. I'm trying to look at the budget book, but I always have a hard time on my smaller copies. Can you tell me how much before this 12,000 that fund was? Do we have that number?
Not in front of me because I don't have it open right now. I have to open the budget book and take a look at it, and I can do that, but I have to get back online.
Okay, so in addition to that question then, will an additional SA be coming for the art in public places?
We already considered that a few weeks ago. You already appropriated the excess for EIPPC.
No, I just want to give you a chance to finish that thought before we answered.
So we've already appropriated the additional funding to their 3% because we underestimated what the 3% was.
Correct,
We've already done it.
correct. We did that supplemental appropriation, I don't know, maybe a month ago?
Okay. That was part of the meeting I missed. Thank you.
Okay. I was trying to be nerdy there because there is a line item in the budget, like 1.8 or something million, but you can't take 3% of that. That's already after the 3% is taken out. So anyways, I
So
see.
we do need the number, though.
Yeah, I'd be interested to find,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
see, and I'll go back and
Yeah.
look too.
So I see that this is, I will accept a motion for a favorable recommendation on this, just so that we get the funds over to the other side, if you will.
I'll make a motion that we give a favorable recommendation to SA 1624.
Second.
All in favor signify by, do we need to hear it? Let's just vote. Just raising your hand. All in
We're not
favor
gonna-
signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Go ahead, Director Dickinson, is that the calculation?
You asked what we had originally appropriated out of these funds. Hold on just a second, I need another schedule here. I need the one that has a split between the two programs, rental assistance and, yeah. Here's one of the schedules that does it. Okay, so for the rental assistance program, we originally appropriated $154,537. And that's what's been expended. And we're asking for this additional 12.
Thanks, and a shout out to Alderman Gay for getting the state legislation passed a couple years ago. Okay, we have,
So I just want to make the comment that the 12,000 will basically cover us for 1/2 of a month, because that's $25,000 a month.
yeah, if it stays the course, yeah, yeah. Wow.
Not that that was funny, but I'm just saying.
No, it's-
Correct, it's not going to cover a lot of requests. And it would only cover a partial month.
Okay. All right, good discussion. Next, we have SA 17-24, which looks like really positive initiative regarding the problem at Truxton, at the Truxton ramp. We have Director Vogel here to speak to it, I believe. It's an allocation of $15,000 from the Capital Reserve Fund to the existing waterfront access infrastructure project, which is news to me at least, and appropriates $84,000. Director Vogel, would you like to speak to that and come up to the mic, or do you have a mic there?
Can I use this one?
Of course you can.
All right, Burr Vogel, Public Works Director. And yes, so planning and zoning is kind of running the effort to study the electrical, what is the root cause, what are the corrective actions for the electrical current at the Truxton boat ramp. The quote they had was about $40,000 or $45,000. We had created this new CIP in the FY24 budget to handle all things related to waterfront infrastructure. And I think the budget amount for that was roughly $80,000. Of that, I had committed $55,000 to a study of about 20 sites where we know we have some repair actions that are needed. So we had $25,000 available already. And so this just transfers a little additional money so that planning and zoning can do this electrical study.
Questions?
I do have a question. Does this address the electrical hazard?
That's exactly what this is for.
Okay.
Yes.
And so in correcting that problem, does it give us an insight into potential problems at other sites? Or is that a one-time
It varies
anomaly?
very specific to this site. I think it's a complicated interaction between BGE's substations and the underwater cable through Spa Creek there and our dock. Somehow there's a current being created. And so, somebody really kind of smart on electrical engineering needs to look at that with marina or waterfront kind of specialty.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Alderman O'Neill? No question. Just a quick question. What is in the, I don't have the capital budget open
Sure, let
on my
me open
little
it
laptop,
real
but
quick.
what is the line item for that? What do we have in there for the existing waterfront access infrastructure project? Just,
84,000.
Okay, so that CIP is 40056. The FY 2024 budget was $80,000 originally. And that's all for planning and design. And the way we had built this was that in FY 2025, there's money for construction. So as we identify and scope out the needed repairs in next year's budget, we'd have money to actually perform those repairs.
Okay, and you're here because this work will be done by Department of Public Works, even though it's appropriated?
No, I'm here because this is my CIP, basically.
Right.
Because this 40056 is a public works CIP, and so we were kind of involved on it, connecting the financial pipes on the back end, really. And we obviously collaborate with the folks upstairs.
Well, that's great. Maybe we'll be able to put a kayak rack there.
Yes, very excited about that.
Do I have a motion for a favorable recommendation of SA 17-24?
I'll make a favorable recommendation for SA 1724.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Thank you. Next, we have SA 18-24, generated by the Harbor Master, which it looks I see that she isn't here, but it looks perhaps self-explanatory. Let's go through this. This appropriates $5,000 from DNR.
Yeah, this is a grant that the Harbor Master they're allowed to go after 2 of these each year. They're individual awards, a little different every year. In this particular case, they asked for funds that would offset the cost of new canvas bags that they use to mark slips as reserved. It's an expenditure the city would have undertaken anyway, just to get new bags, but this allows them to get more and not at cost to the city. So that's what this is for. So it's a grant from the state that they apply for.
Thank you. I didn't know specifically what a mooring cover was, but now I do know what they are and see them. Okay. Any questions? I'll accept a motion for a favorable recommendation for SA 18-24.
I'll make that motion for favorable recommendation to the council, SA 1824.
I second it.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, what we're going to do is go to the fund transfers, and then we'll go back to SA 12-24. So we have fund transfer 5-24 for $112,000, and it's reallocation from the forfeiture asset and seizure fund supply and other account to their contractual services account. And this will provide funding for rent and leases. So we're looking forward to an explanation of this, and just introduce yourself again, and thank you for being here.
Hi,
Hi.
Lieutenant Ashian with the police department again. So I'll start this by asking if everybody checked their emails within the last couple days and saw some correspondence regarding this fund transfer, which was based on an inquiry that was made by Alderman Savage. Yeah, is everybody, so I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page with that. If not,
We
I
might
will.
need to recap only because the
That's fine.
public's not privy to emails. Do you know what I mean?
Okay,
Right?
yeah,
So just quick
so
recap of his concern.
that's fine. I'll go over real quick what the forfeiture fund is for anybody who isn't familiar. So the forfeiture fund primarily comes, so there are 2 different sources of forfeiture funds. One's through the Department of Justice, which is what we're going to be talking about today. That's where the vast majority of the funds in the forfeiture account come from. A smaller amount from Treasury, but we'll just stick with DOJ for right now, since that's what's really concerned here. So these funds are a part of what's called equitable sharing. So we have a task force officer who conducts very high-level, large-scale drug investigations, along with other task force agencies and the federal government. And in the course, as you might imagine, of these investigations, assets are seized as being the product of illegal criminal enterprises. Most simply put, money from dealing drugs. So there is the criminal prosecution that takes place, and there is also a civil asset forfeiture process which takes place on the federal level. Now, once these civil proceedings come to conclusion, whatever was seized is then distributed among the agencies who participated, and that's where the idea behind equitable sharing comes from. So the idea is that we're putting our resources out there to conduct these, to assist with conducting these investigations. So then some of the funds that are seized as a result of these investigations are then sent back to the police department to augment or assist with law enforcement operations. So that's just a little bit of background, baseline information about where these funds come from and why they actually wind up coming in at all. So if the funds come from the DOJ, DOJ gives guidance, or really sort of there are restrictions on what the funds can and cannot be used for, which is something that is apparently of acute concern for Alderman Savage. He wanted to make sure that we weren't using the funds for something that we weren't supposed to use them for. So in my response, rather than just saying, yes, we can use the funds for this, since he was questioning it in the first place, I reached out to someone from DOJ and said, hey, just to get an outside opinion on this, can we use the funds for this? The answer was, yes, you can absolutely use the funds for that. So that was the whole purpose behind that. I just thought it was appropriate that if he was going to, so he inquired with finance and then finance inquired with me. I thought it would be appropriate that if I'm going to answer his question about it, it should be shared with the finance committee as well, since this will be coming to you first. So that's where all that came from.
Thank you for the background, yeah.
So in these do's and don'ts regarding the use of the funds, one of the major do's, one of the things you have to do with the funds is something that supports police department operations. All right, so the idea is that you can use it for something that is involved in the functioning of the police department, but if we wanted to redo some sidewalks somewhere off of Forest Drive, that's not really an appropriate use for it. That's an illustrative example. And one of the major don'ts, aside from don't use it for something that doesn't involve the police department's operations, is that you can't use the funds for something that has been previously budgeted for. So you can't just swap the funds, the forfeiture funds, out for something that's already in the budget, or that the department or the city generally pays for anyhow. So there is a little bit more to it. I don't imagine that you want to go through all of it right now, but that's the idea, is that it's supposed to support operations. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about that before I continue?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think we want to know what the rent and lease part of it is, but
Right.
you're going to get to that.
Yep. So that's actually the very next part. So in order to some of the law enforcement operations that we conduct, that these funds are actually being used to pay for, we tend to keep it more or less in the same wheelhouse. So these are narcotics investigations that wind up bringing in these funds. So the expenditures wind up being, by far and large, on items which augment and assist with narcotics investigations. It probably doesn't come as a huge surprise to anybody that if you have officers who operate in an undercover capacity, having them walk in and out of the police station day in and day out might not be the best thing for them. And that would be correct. So there is a covert location where those members go. And rather than purchasing a building, it's a lease. Wow. And there are also covert vehicles, because it also unsurprisingly turns out that if you have an unmarked Ford Explorer or Dodge Durango, that a lot of times people look at and they say, that might be a law enforcement officer right there. And quite often they are correct about that. So there are vehicles which we obtain for the use of our investigators that don't appear to be so much like police vehicles. And so these funds are used for that, among a couple other things, but those are like some of the big ticket items. And there are also expenses that are associated with the leased location that I spoke about. You have to pay utilities and things like that. But it's all under the umbrella of costs associated with the site. And this is, you'll probably notice if you read that email that those additional expenses were included in the assessment that I requested from the DOJ. So then we get to the fund transfer, right? What is this? So how much, the question might be, how much more of these funds are we asking for in order to pay for these things? Well, the answer is none. I use analogies a lot when I'm talking about things that aren't my first area of expertise, because it helps me to understand them. So the idea behind this fund transfer is that if each account that we're looking at here, whether it's supplies or rents and leases, whatever it is, if that's a cup, or like a large serving bowl that you go to periodically and pull water out of or money out of in order to pay for certain items, but you fill those cups from the same pitcher of water, forfeiture funds in this particular instance, if you didn't fill one of the cups up enough, or there's enough water to cover everything that needs to be covered between the cups. But if you wind up actually needing to pay for one item out of rents and leases, but the money got put in supplies instead, water just needs to get poured from one cup to the other. That's my very simplistic version of this. I'll defer to finance if my simplistic representation has any material shortcomings.
No, it's just that they need more in rents and leases, and they don't need what they have appropriated in the supplies account, so they'd like to move some over there.
So it works out.
Yeah, it's a fund transfer. It's just moving appropriations from one account to another.
Yep. You might be asking yourself, why are you taking all this time to explain that very simple thing about this? It doesn't seem like a very big deal. It's mostly because there has been a lot of questions raised about it, and I'm not really sure why, but I wanted to make sure that all the information got put out there from the background information, so nobody had any questions about where the money was coming from to begin with. That we were allowed to use it for the things that we're using it for. And it's also worth noting that what we're spending it on isn't changing at all. It's just where we're scooping the water from that's changing. Actually, where we're scooping the water from is not changing, sorry. Where the water is placed so that we can scoop it out is changing. Sorry, my analogy broke down there for a minute.
No, we got it. If you couldn't fill the rent and lease cup with this, would you be in trouble? I mean, would you have?
I'd say so, probably. We'd be in trouble, right? Because there's not enough water in the cup. from which to scoop.
If you've signed commitments for leases for certain things, for property, automobiles, whatever, and we don't have enough to cover it, yes, we'd have to find a way to pay those legal agreements for leases. Or you'd just be able to lease less space or fewer vehicles.
Okay. All good.
All right.
Do I have any questions? All right, at this time, I'll accept a favorable recommendation for this fund transfer, FT 5-24.
Madam Chair, I'll make a favorable recommendation for FT 524.
Second.
And I want on the record the the captain's analogy, please.
Yes, on the record. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you for that explanation. I always learn something new about how you operate, and that's pretty, it's pretty impressive, that's all. Thank you so much.
All right, sure thing.
Okay, Alderwoman O'Neill, was your intention to go to this before legislation, correct? Okay, so we're circling back to SA 12-24, which is using reserve for one-time uses, contractual services. Our last meeting, we postponed action because we asked for the detail, specifically for the union negotiations, the rewriting of the city code, and the consultant/surveyor work for I always have a hard time saying that word, Gibraltar Avenue, sorry, Rhonda, and Jeremy's Way. It looks like we have this now. Will this be able to be attached to we can do that, okay, cool. I see that our city attorney, Michael Lyles, is here. Thank you. I know you had a court case or something, or thank you for getting here. And
Good morning.
Good morning. Do you wish to speak first of any summary?
Sure, I'll give a brief summary. My name is Mike Lyles. I'm the city attorney. Glad to be with you today. This supplemental appropriation is to assist the Office of Law in carrying out union negotiations, which started in earnest in the last few weeks, and to pay invoices for work already completed relating to rewriting some of the sections of the code related to APF, which the council had indicated a desire to have done, and the work was completed, and there was an outstanding invoice. Additionally, there was work related to taking over Gibraltar Avenue and Jeremy's Way. In order to take that over, we needed to do survey work and land-related work that we don't have the expertise in the office to do or in the city government to do. So we hired to do the survey, the land surveys, and to do the property descriptions necessary for us to append to our legal documents that would be filed before the city takes over those streets.
Could I just ask an accounting question? We have the breakdown of the 199,200, which is the value of the supplemental appropriation. Your itemization of legal services that totals 160,000. How does that relate to that, or am I missing something really obvious?
I can answer that. We prepared this because the bottom table on that sheet is what's currently in the operating budget per the budget request for FY24. That was the breakdown of what was requested in the 160. So that the table at the top is what's being requested through this request. So the existing budget is the bottom table, and the top table is what's being requested.
Alderwoman Finlayson has a question.
So the second chart relates to union negotiations, totally.
The top, no. When the Office of Law came to Finance, we were putting the budget together last year and asked for legal services budget. This is the breakdown that supported what was in the budget.
That's not my question.
None of that money there, the 160, none of that was for union negotiations.
The 160 on the second chart does not
No,
relate
that's-
to the union negotiations
No.
of
That's
160 at the top
correct.
chart.
On July 1, that was the legal services budget appropriation for the Office of Law, and none of it relates to union negotiations or the city code rewrite or the Gibraltar Avenue Jeremy's Way. And what they're asking for is additional funds to cover these other services.
So I was going to ask an initial question, the 160,000 for union negotiations, that can't be the total dollar amount for union negotiations. Or can it be?
So 100, I think that was supposed to mirror what we ended up spending last year? The last time around, 2 years ago?
Yes.
I don't understand what that means then.
We based the 160 that we're asking for the supplemental appropriation on what we spent in the previous negotiations.
So is this just legal cost for negotiations, not the cost of union negotiations, which means all the benefits and et cetera?
No, it's just the lawyer
So this is
fees.
just for the legal
Legal fees.
And I thought our chief negotiator, Mr. Silvestri, was no longer going to be with us. So is there another representative or someone else that we've hired to do that?
Well, the chief negotiator is the city manager. We hire attorneys who are experts in labor relations and who have relationships across unions across the state to assist. And so the lawyers assist the chief negotiator, city manager, and his team in negotiating the terms and conditions of the union contract.
Well, I'm well aware, as you know, of that. And Mr. Silvestri also represents a major hospital in the city of Milwaukee, so I'm familiar with them across the country. But the point is, did we hire somebody to replace him?
We did.
So
We hired a new attorney, yes.
I'm sorry?
We hired a new law firm, yes.
Okay, so so that's the 160,000 to be paid to the new law firm that's taking over the negotiations?
It's a budgeted item for the legal fees related to union negotiations.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so let me simplify. I'm sorry, you had a question? It looks like, in studying all of this, whatever it's for, is that we have I added these two up. So we have $359,200 for outsourcing legal activities, and some of it is spent, some of it will be spent. I think that was some of the concern at our last meeting is, yikes, some of this is already spent, so where would that money come from if we don't approve this? And I don't know if that's a moot point or not, but there is a question in this, is that you feel now that the $359,200, adding these two numbers up together, is your outsourcing of legal services value. That's what you have, that's what you will have to spend on outsourcing legal services. That's how I look at it. That should be right?
That's the way I would look at it.
Yeah.
Yes, this is the total cost, as we know it now, unless if some other project comes up that we are not anticipating, there may be another need for outsourcing legal services, but as of right now, this is what the Office of Law anticipates to be its need for the budget.
And so, I guess this is a naive question. What do we do if money is already spent, okay, and hypothetically, some of this is already spent, the majority of it is already spent. If we don't approve this, then how is that addressed?
So I would say that what you're looking at in the original 160,000, those are estimates on what they will spend for those purposes.
Correct.
Those haven't been spent yet. The city code rewrite is done, and I'm not sure about the Gibraltar Avenue and Jeremy's Way work has been done, but the union negotiations is also not complete, has not been spent. These are estimates of what it will take for those services, and I believe the 160,000 is probably high estimate for those services, so hopefully we won't spend all that. But, so not all of it's spent. It's just, this is what we think we're going to spend on these projects.
Thanks. Alderwoman O'Neill has some questions.
Thank you. I guess my biggest frustration is that we've been doing budgets for however many years and union negotiations for however number of years, and we just forgot to put it in the budget.
That was a budget oversight. We knew we wanted to put money in there and talked about it, but it did not get done. It was, I would say, it would land on our plate, not remembering to put it in there. So somehow it fell through the cracks. The last time around, I think we had budgeted around $90,000 for the services, and it came out significantly higher for the union negotiations. So we made that work. But if we get to the end of the year and the Office of Law didn't have enough to cover all this, we'd have to find it in another budget and transfer it with our fourth quarter transfer.
So there's a possibility that at the end of the year, it could be more than the 199.2 that we're adding to.
If other projects came up, in addition to what you see there. See, the second two items there have already been expended, correct? The Jeremy's Way and
Yes.
Gibraltar Avenue, we've already
The-
had those services.
The 27.2 has been spent and paid for out of my budget, and the Gibraltar Avenue and Jeremy's Way consultants invoice has been paid out of the budget.
And so the 27.2 for the rewrite, is the rewrite complete?
The work that we asked the lawyer to do has been completed.
All right. Will that number go up because of reporting, or?
I'm not understanding what you're saying.
I'm guessing that there's going to be a final report as to what changes and alterations were made to the code, and will this number go up at all for?
Well, the rewrite was presented to the council, and you voted on it and approved it.
That was the work that the outside attorney did. What's
Yeah.
her name? Linda.
Why can't I think of what that was?
So there's no more.
Yeah, it's done.
There's nothing else. There's nothing else to do unless we get a directive or an order to do something else. But the work that we were requested to do with respect to the APF, cleaning that up
APF,
and
thank you.
doing some clarifying language was completed, and we brought a package to the council, and the council voted and approved it.
Okay. Thank you.
There were,
Go ahead. I do have another question,
yeah.
but you go ahead.
So there were some emails that the public, wasn't aware of, and Alderman Savage asked some very specific questions. And then, but the gist of that, moving forward, and I think what is missing in this is what the council knew and what the council didn't know, and it brings up a simple solution moving forward is to have those updates that we have had in the past, where you come to us, closed door session perhaps, and say, look, this is where I'm spending money or will spend money, and what do you guys think? So are those scheduled, or do you agree that we should have those? I don't know if it's a code requirement, but it's something that should probably happen at least quarterly, right? So this doesn't come up again where we're caught off guard and approving stuff that's already been spent, et cetera.
Well, two things about that. We're always ready to meet you, but we do not control your schedule.
Okay.
So that's one, but we'd be glad to meet whenever we can get it on the schedule.
Okay.
Secondly, our office is one that is not just proactive, we're reactive, meaning someone asks us to do something, we do it.
Yeah.
And hopefully those that ask us to do those things have the money and funds for us to carry out the directives that we've been given.
Yeah. So I'll direct it to the assistant city manager that we put on the radar that we have these updates. Do you concur?
I've made a note.
Thank you. Alderwoman Finlayson has a question.
Well, my question was about the budget, but I don't think we generally get what it costs when you give your presentations on the legal cases that you're working on. So I'm not sure, it would be helpful to know what we're working on, but I'm not sure we'll know what those things are costing us at that time. So that's just a statement. It doesn't require.
Well, let me just add, if I might, that there are two things that happen. One, we prepare a budget for those things that we know that the office has to spend in any particular year. And then that budget presentation that we provide, we get pretty darn close to what we're supposed to spend and have every year. This is probably an outlier year where something didn't get attached to our budget as it should have, and one or two items totaling about $30,000-$40,000 we were directed to take on a task, and we did the task, but we didn't have it budgeted. So we're probably pretty close to our budget year after year. With respect to cases that we handle cases where we defend the city, and those costs, payouts are done not in our budget, but in the self-insurance fund, which I and risk management oversee. And so you wouldn't see that until maybe year end. We try to budget an amount to cover litigation, but as you know, we get sued for all manner of thing all the time. And so we have to have sufficient funds, about $2 million in our fund to cover litigation payouts as well as legal fees and costs associated with expert fees, deposition costs, in any manner of thing that it might cost us to litigate a particular case. So those kinds of things are covered that way. So that's really only the two big buckets that of what we spend that I have control over.
Thank you for that. My second question deals with your first comment about the budget and how the budget is created and allocated. And I thought I heard Ms. Dickinson say this was left out. When you present your budget, do you include increases as enhancements?
I do. It depends on whether it's an enhancement, meaning something that I expect to go up in cost or price, or we're getting something new. We're getting a new piece of software, or we're some things are given to us, like our Xerox copier. We don't budget for that. That money is put in our budget and we pay it out. But I have no way of knowing what it, how we're, how we account for that. That's just given to us. But what we control is mostly the contract services and miscellaneous for ads. Like we'll put ads in the newspaper when certain laws, rules, policies are changed. We have to do an ad out of our office if we're doing bond notifications. Sometimes we can't budget appropriately for those because we don't know when they're going to come. We try to approximate. And over the last several years, we've been pretty good at making sure that we have all of those kinds of expenses, unexpected, covered. And as you might suspect, we haven't had to come to you much for these kinds of things.
Well, I guess, one, it would behoove us to make sure that we ask about enhancements, to make sure that they are being included, because some things might be enhancements and some things are more of a necessity, I would think, especially in the law department.
Yes, I mean, our work is really generated to some degree by what happens to the city. And we don't really know, we can't budget for those things far in advance. Like, for instance, with respect to Jeremy's Way, the council had indicated that it wanted to do street and parks, and it wanted the city to take over street and parks, and it wanted the city to beautify street and parks. Well, one street and park where the community wanted us to do that, we don't own the street. So we can't own the street and park until we own the street. So this kind of goes with that direction that the council wanted us to go in, something that we hadn't budgeted for in advance of getting the directive to move out on it.
Thus, the value of the fiscal impact note, which needs to be inclusive. Jeremy's Way is the perfect example. When you were directed to take that over, we needed to know all the costs of taking over that street and the street and park. but that's a whole nother issue for us. So thank you. Madam Chair, I will make a favorable recommendation for SA 1224.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have two pieces of, oh, we might have to postpone something. Okay, we have two pieces of legislation. We have a hard, do we have a hard stop at noon? Is that what I'm hearing? Or
I have a hard stop.
Yeah, okay, because Assistant City Manager has a very important discussion that I think you'd want to be here for, is the fee waiver findings. Is there a possibility? Oh, it is short. Okay, I'll just talk faster. First piece of legislation is R56-23. This is a fee adjustment for abandoned vehicles. I'm the sponsor for this, so I'll tell you what the genesis of this was. As you may or may not know, Alderwoman O'Neill and I attend these meetings every other week with the Director Moore, Marcus Moore, and SP Plus and Premium. And what has come up continuously are how to handle abandoned vehicles and the cost of towing them and the dialogue and finding out, you know, oh, is it really abandoned? Because you don't want to tow somebody's active vehicle. And then in the course of that, I looked up other municipalities and said, how did they handle it? And what stuck out very clearly was the fee. Our fee was very minimal compared to others, but at the same time, our fee is not meant to be a deterrent. It is meant to cover the costs. And SP Plus is in concurrence that this would cover that cost. And because there has been situations where they don't enforce because of the, you know, when you tow a car, they have to pay for stuff that storage or what have you. This is a problem. It's not something addressing a non-problem. I speak of Boxwood Avenue specifically. That is between my ward and Alderman Schottelmeyer's ward, and there's cars there that are just left there, and I'm sure, you know, it isn't something that they look for, but it's just something that we get complaints on, and this is a way to hopefully address it. Alderwoman O'Neill, you had a question?
No, I didn't have a question.
Madam Chair, I'd like, oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were going to ask.
No, go ahead.
I would like to tout the success of SP Plus, because when I find these abandoned cars, and I find them frequently, as in 2 days ago, they are on it. They are on it. And it seems to be a deterrent. I'm going to support the increase in the fines, but they are following up and they are removing vehicles as are needed. So, Madam Chair, I would move that we give a favorable recommendation to R5623.
I'll second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, that will help a lot. Okay, the next resolution is a fee waiver. I believe we did this last year.
We did.
The mayor is introducing this, and it is to waive the parking of this annual reception that the Visitors Center of Annapolis has. I believe it's coming up January 23rd, 2024. Do we have any questions on this that I believe the Assistant City Manager might be able to answer? It does have the staff report and the fiscal analysis attached. The city will forego $3,253 based on probably what was waived last year.
Madam Chair, I'll
questions?
make a recommendation for a favorable recommendation. We said we wanted to.
Second.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, great. We're going right to general discussion on fee waivers, and we have Assistant City Manager Vicki Burkhart, who is here to discuss the work that she has done.
Buckland.
Did I just say Buckland? What did I say, Burkhart? That's an actress, isn't it? Sarah Burkhart. All right. Wow, you have done work. All right.
Thank you. So I'll make this relatively short. The council had, obviously, the question of fees and fee waivers has come up in several different contexts over the course of certainly the time that I've been here. And one of the fundamental questions that had been asked was just, what does that volume really look like? There's a series of normal waivers, places where the city forgoes collecting revenue, but in ways that are less, that I didn't include here. That includes things like we're offering 2 hours of free parking, right, during the holidays, right, and some things like that. A lot of the questions and a lot of the discussion that had come up was around much more targeted individual, what's our relationship with like nonprofit organizations, special events, things like that. So what I have here is just a very basic summary of what's happened over the last couple of years with respect in particular to special events and to rentals. There are a couple of things, sort of just general philosophy in some ways. These are amounts, historically, we have budgeted revenues based on what we've gotten in the past, rather than another way of looking at that is, is there a particular portion of our operating costs that we want to recover through fees? Are there particular organizations that we want to waive fees for, but up to a certain amount? Or do we have an allowance for waivers? There's a lot of different ways of looking at that. Couple of things that I noticed in this. One is that the estimates for the special events that we give we're not always updating them, because what we're waiving is what the city actually bears, right? On sort of a normal basis, what we would charge is, here's the cost of the city services. And in the case of special events like these, St. Patrick's Day Parade and stuff like that, we waive those, right? But we tried to do that with our eyes open through an estimate. Some of those estimates appear we've recycled the same number a few times. So I think there's some general updating that we probably need to be careful of on our side. For Rec and Parks, what you'll notice, this is rentals of like field rentals. And you'll see that though the value of waivers for special events has gone up, even with that caveat that we've underestimated some things, the estimate, the waivers for rentals have gone down. But there are two things to be aware of in that number. The two biggest reasons for the change in that number are that there are some private organizations who appear to have gotten waivers in the past that didn't in FY23. So nonprofits still did, but there were some for-profits that did not get waivers. And there were clearly some changes in use patterns. So this organization appears to have used fewer days, right? Which means that the waiver is less, right? I did not, when I was looking through that data, see instances where like a nonprofit used to get a waiver and then we stopped giving them that in FY23. That does not look to be like what that was. Biggest difference I saw were those two things, some for-profits and then just a different usage pattern. Regardless, over the last couple of years, for these two purposes, the city's waived about more than $150,000 in fees. Obviously, we've had a whole bunch of discussions today about supplemental appropriations, things we'd like to do. This is revenue the city chose to forego, which is a perfectly fine decision. But part of what I had heard from you guys was wanting to be more deliberate about that decision. That's certainly a discussion that we're going to be having as we put together the budget. There's no decision to be made right now. What I wanted to do was to simply get this in front of you, to give you a chance to ruminate, think about it, get a sense of the scale, so that later on, when we're talking about budget in more depth, you have this context and you will have had a chance to think of what questions do I have? What more might I want to know? How do I view this? So this is mostly to kind of close that loop, give you some information, and give you then time before we get to budget discussions. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you so much for doing this. One thing I missed in what you just said. What is the parameters of a review between the nonprofit and for-profit?
I was just looking at, because the underlying data that I had here was, it was, here were the rentals we had. This one was waived, this one was not, right?
Okay.
Who was that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So organizations that were for-profit, private organizations.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I
Yes,
just have a
Lee.
quick question.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate this. This is really great. I think it's a great tool and starting place for us as we deliberate. I've been saying, as far as transparency goes, that we should not create a resolution or I don't want to create more than we have to, but it would be really nice for the public to know that we have a basis for them to be able to request those fee waivers. And I think that this goes a long way in helping us get to that point so that we are able to build a program per se.
Yeah.
If my
Parameters.
colleagues, if my colleagues agree, and I think that utilizing this information will better be able, instead of every council meeting, us getting a fee waiver and us being pulled at the heartstrings by one organization or another, like, it gives us that building block so that we can formulate that program, so to speak.
Do you feel that the code needs improvement on that system?
I actually don't have an opinion on that front. A lot of what I was doing here was just sheer data collection, but I can take a look and develop an opinion.
Yeah. Ultimately, it might need, because I couldn't, find anything really of guardrails or parameters. And like Alderwoman O'Neill said, it's, your heartstring, or what we did last year, is usually the governing factor. Alderwoman Finlayson.
I do have a couple of questions. Alderman Arnett and I were just having a discussion about the difference between services that we provide as a necessity and then those social elements that we provide, which also are a necessity. And I think our giving fee waivers falls into that social element. And so we're going to have to delineate between the value of both of those. My question has to do with what types of events, if you can answer that, because APD clearly has doubled in the last year. Are they general waivers for football games and that kind of thing, or are they specific types of events? I don't know whether we do funerals or whatever.
These are specific events. So things like St. Patrick's Day Parade, the Veterans Day ceremony, Juneteenth. There are a couple of things that, and this may be frankly, some of this is new. So in FY23, for example, there was a bigger Pride Parade, for example, that had more there. So there was more costs associated with that, for example, right? So there's some stuff that was just new in FY23. That's part of that difference, but it's specific events like that, military bowl, parade, that kind of stuff.
So none of those things that you mentioned are new. And maybe they have changed, they have been enhanced, enlarged, or whatever, but not new.
So, like I said, this is part of my first
Yeah, I
comment
understand
about
that. I don't expect you to have the answers. I'm just pointing out the anomalies, because if anybody is going to look at this, they're going to ask that question. Same thing with ADOT. Last year, our garage was down, but it was less by a third or more over this year. So, and the garage has been open for the 6 months that we've been into this year, but their numbers have tripled.
Yeah, the biggest difference on the parking side was a much larger amount related to, it looks like St. Patrick's Day. I would have to find out what was behind that. But hence my comment about, I think that that process of estimating what do we think the city's expenses will be, making sure that, when Katie prepares that fiscal impact statement, that she's actually got really good information, that they have good information. I think that's an effort on our part.
Well, I really appreciate this. I think it would be very helpful, and I do have a question about Recs and Parks also, because they reduced by a third. So what was very different that allowed, did they have fewer events? Was, bad weather, whatever. But what was the significant change there? But it may be helpful to look at multi-years also, to see if one year or the other was an anomaly. So, but thank you. I appreciate this. This gives us a real snapshot.
I just want to say this in respect to Felicia Nolan and the legislation that my colleagues passed years ago, special event legislation, is that we do have a vehicle to manage this. And every year, Felicia and I meet and we write this thing, a resolution.
Oh, yeah.
It's for the purpose of identifying city-supported. We changed the word from sponsored to supported, but it basically means we're going to waive fees for this list.
Yeah.
And it goes before council. So it's an opportunity next year to really have a good number for that.
Yeah, Felicia was very helpful in this process.
Oh, I'm sure she was, yeah. Yeah.
But, we all have 1,000 things going on, and me asking deliberate questions uncovered some additional pieces. And so now we know.
Yeah, and it makes sense because we did adopt after that, and the Pride Parade was added. It was added as a city-supported event. So that justifies, an increase. So, yeah.
And Madam Chair, if you were to go back several years, you would find that a similar document was created by your predecessor. So we have a record.
Oh, that's right, it was Alderman Budge.
Because it was Alderman Budge who worked with that committee to determine the nonprofits that we would be sponsoring in the city.
And we use that legislation continuously,
But thank you.
Thank you for that work. Okay, we just have an update from Director Dickinson. If you have anything to add or tell us, or trying to think if we have anything pertinent.
No, same old vacancies. We have a retirement in purchasing, and that position has been filled. Vanessa, our buyer.
Okay.
So she's retiring. And that position is filled, but it vacated another position on in the billings and collections side. So we have a senior buyer that's still vacant. We have a cashier position now that's vacant. I listed the senior accountant for accounts receivable, which is something that we've been talking about for a while, to try to follow up on some of these lease agreements and short-term rentals, my new position that I got in the budget last year. So
Yeah.
I've listed that one, and the person that was serving as in our accounting manager role is leaving, and so we're trying to fill that as well. So I've got 4 positions listed, and we're working on filling all those. We are working on the annual financial report. We were trying to get that out by the end of the calendar year, but I think it's probably going to be January. We're closer than we've been in the last few years, but that's probably going out in January. As you know, we're starting the budget development process, so that's taking up a lot of our time as well. We have decided to provide the council with a November month-end budget versus actual report. Since the first quarter report was so late to get to you, we wanted to give you a more up-to-date one without waiting for the next quarter to end. So we're preparing a November statement to come to you to look at budget versus actual. The report that we typically provide quarterly. And the union negotiations are underway, and we're gathering a lot of information to provide them.
Those are starting, you said, or?
Yep, we've started the meetings and information gathering and those types of things.
Do you have any questions, Alderman?
Just one, do we have a procurement officer yet?
Yes, his name is Mike Garashia. We hired the procurement officer in May.
May?
Yeah,
Okay, I'm afraid I missed that.
So who's senior buyer?
Senior buyer, that was vacated last spring, and we've listed a couple times and have no luck getting somebody on board. And we've contemplated getting a temp in and tried a couple times, but so far we haven't been, the first one we were going to bring in got another job somewhere else. So we're starting over with the temp agency to try to get somebody in to fill that position.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I just had your quarter report that you sent. It's, it's good estimating. That's all. I mean, I don't know if you agree, but if you prorate, quarterly spent, it's on track.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything that stuck out.
Right. We try to give you the notes over to the side of anything that would look out of proportion to what it would normally be, why something is more is spent or less is spent, and what's causing that. We have a few notes down the right-hand column. So if you ever have any follow-up questions on that, please feel free to email Katie and Capri.
to Katie. Yeah.
They're the starting point for the questions. So.
Okay. I do have a question. It's off, but who is the city doc consultant? Who is that?
Fogarty Consulting.
Is that her title? Okay. That's in the fiscal year 24 budget, right? I didn't know if it was
So
outsourced
what are you looking at? Are you seeing that in that quarterly report and there's a note about it? It
Yeah.
used to be budgeted in the city manager's office, and I think we put it into Public Works, into the project, the city doc project
Okay,
now.
that's why I thought it might have been another consultant. I got it. Thanks.
I think it's that you're going to see it there, or you're not going to see it in the city manager's budget this year, and it was there last year. So when you look at those columns that show progress to date for the past years, you'll see why it doesn't compare.
Got it.
Well, may I follow up? We're not going to see it in this year's budget. Does that mean the job is completed, the contract?
No, we've moved the cost of that consultant into the city doc capital project. It's not being accounted for or budgeted in the city manager's budget anymore.
That's where.
Okay,
So when you look at this year's city manager's budget, you're going to see a lower level of spending there in this year versus prior years.
Tell Mike not to spend it.
Yeah, which isn't a reflection of less,
Right.
that we're not doing it, it's just being shown in a different
It's
place.
someplace else.
Okay. All right. If there's not anything for the good of the order, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
I will, Madam Chair, move that we adjourn.
I second, and all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye.